Now, good morning, everyone. It's second day in Prague. I do hope you had a fantastic evening last night. Now, typically, it's not a good time to present on a Thursday, because a lot of people go out on a Wednesday, so I'm very lucky to have a time slot, exactly in the middle of the sessions and just before noon. Now, very much appreciate quite a number of people that did show up. Now, today I'm going to talk about security awareness. And when we're going to walk through that program, we're going to, look at some, why does security very often fail? We're going to have a look at, some things that actually happened. How often did SAP got breached? How often does the industry talk about it? Now, of course, during that talk, the general message is, how do I generate security awareness within my SAP user community? Now, I will give you some basic examples on the way we've done it internally. Now, we will actually also run a very short security quiz. Because, in order to make security attractive and workable, it needs to stay fun. So we're also going to run through a short example there. Now, at first, the human element within the organization is very often the most neglected element within, in order to prepare for a cyber defense strategy. Now, what we see here on the left side, the ostrich, is very often how we see it in real life. A lot of people know about it, but they don't care about it. Now, where we want to go to, and something that we do evangelize, we want to make your SAP user community actually aware. Having the additional pair of eyes will help us to just generate more security awareness. The more people that know about it, the less things that would happen on your system. So, and of course, putting a fence around your system is not the only thing that you should do. Now, I used, a bit of a funny example here where you put a fence around the sheep fields. Now, imagine that is your SAP system. Now, there will always be wolves and dogs that could actually jump over the fence. And there's actually also sheep that could get out. Now, of course, it's one of those measures that you need to have in place. It's a basic security element, but don't just always rely on this alone. It's just one of the many mechanisms. Now, try to reflect that to the SAP world. You've got critical Rfc function calls. It's a very famous SAP attack vector. Now, if you use tools like SAP Yukon, you can actually block specific Rfc functions from being executed. Now, but as soon as you have to whitelist one of those functions, they again become accessible to everyone. So even though sometimes you can close a few vulnerabilities, you would always leave open some white spots. So very important, don't get a full sense of security just because of this. Now, another important topic being SAP Patches. Now, SAP does release patches once a month. I do believe it's every second Tuesday of the month. Now, patching an SAP system is not the same like running an upgrade. You don't have to wait for an upgrade. You could do that on a lot more frequent basis. Now, this slide here shows, it's not something that we've done. We actually got the data from IT Online magazine DE. That's a German magazine. They are specialized in running also surveys, and they did run a survey within the German-speaking SAP market, and they actually questioned, how often do you patch your system? That was a question they've raised to SAP basis personnel. Now, 40% say they do patch the system 4 times a year. Now, I've been working in SAP for close to 20 years. That's not true. They have been very optimistic in answering those questionnaires. Now, realistically, what we do see is that especially the hot fixes and the urgent patches, they do get implemented on some of the boxes, on the highly critical ECC box, but then they forgot they also run a test box, a solution manager, and by accident these systems are interconnected. So actually, in order to religiously follow that, you would have to always patch your entire landscape. Now, later on in the session, I'm going to show you and talk you through some examples of how we do Rfc penetration testing. And the results are actually shocking, how easy it is sometimes to jump from system to system. Now, this slide here shows, these are SAP Security Notes. I've downloaded them all. There's about 4,000 notes that SAP has created since 2001. Now, we've listed them by creation date. Now, you make an estimated guess on when SAP started really caring about SAP security. 2010. All of a sudden, someone woke up and they've instantly started scanning their own code base and they saw an enormous amount of vulnerabilities. Now, 2018, that number is not accurate. I had to give this presentation deck in many months before today's date. So meanwhile, we're almost at level of 2017. So we do see a constant trend in this. Now, password policies. Now, I do believe, the initial statement may sound a bit funny, but if we run a security assessment, you may be surprised how often we still see standard users being active in the system, not being logged, having standard passwords. And that is painfully shocking because SAP delivers a tool out of the box since many years to just scan for that. But even people don't have the habit of always religiously doing that on a frequent basis. Now, also users having predictive, brute force sensitive passwords is a bit more difficult to explain. And for that, I've also included a link here. It links to a TED talk from an American university that gives a bit more of a scientific story to how to compile a good password. Should it be long? Should it be a sentence? Should it be my life story? It needs to be something that you can remember. Now, I don't have the time to go into the details. It takes you 15 minutes to go through it. It's absolutely worth it. Do check it out. It's really a very good speech. Now, what we do see is that a lot of users, they recycle passwords. The password they use on Facebook, they also may use on your productive instance. So you would be really surprised. Now, this is a video that I took from YouTube. It may sound like a social engineering joke, but it actually is reality. And we've done something very similar also on the SAP shop floor. Now, this footage is not taken by us, but it does allow me to go for a quick drink, and you guys can watch it for a minute.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a small background.
And what's his name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where did you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hitchwater Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. And did you have this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like that password, you're going to do Jolie and a number. Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95. Got it.
So you need to get my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 4, 6, 8, and then Israel. It's only 3, but it's for me it's strong enough.
I heard 1, 2, 3, 4. Gemma. 1, 2, 3. Spelled G-E-N.
Most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, what's a good Italian password?
My grandma's name.
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, I need my password.
Anyway, of course, this is more of the joking material, but also a reality. The importance of passwords should really not be underestimated. Now, I quickly want to show you the very same thing on a Fiori Launchpad. So, actually, let me quickly connect to our internal Fiori Launchpad. Now, and it may be something that also still works on your own systems. So, I connect. Now, you see my username, my password. Actually, I've been a little bit insecure because my password is stored in my browser. Now, I just have to press the button F12, which is a bit of a magical debugger. You double-click on the password field. You do a right-click. you do inspect elements. You have to try this on your own systems. I bet it works, because this vulnerability is there in about every single browser on the market today. So there's a password field here, the type. It says password. If I just remove that and press the enter, that's my password field. Absolutely available to everyone. You just have to make sure that, that's rule number 1. If you leave your machine, lock it. Because getting into a system is actually very, very easy. Now, coming back to the password story. Now, of course, passwords, if you have to use them, make sure they are sufficiently long. Don't use 8 characters, which is the standard. At least use 10 characters. Now, also use very uncommon passwords, which would reduce the risk of brute forcing. Now, brute forcing a password, you may want to Google for it. There's lots of applications for it. Even for SAP. Even for the more modern hashing algorithms, you will find brute forcing applications. Now, of course, change it very regular. A password is like your underwear. You change it very often, you keep it private, and you don't want to exchange it with anyone. Now, and of course, more from a system administration side, make sure that you do use recent hash algorithms. But the question is, why still use passwords? I know sometimes because you have to, but there's many other ways, meanwhile, in today's world, single sign-on, two-factor authentication. I still recall the app that I have from my bank, it actually recognizes my face. Now, we're not that far yet in SAP, but we are definitely on the way. Good. Now, security, very often it's avoidable and unworkable. Now, you do see here there's a road with a barrier in between. Now, you see what happens. People tend to use the road of the least resistance. And that's the exact same thing you need to do within your own organization. Security should become unavoidable, but workable. And one of the key elements to get there is the ones that set the policy for security, they should actually walk the talk themselves. I was grown as a developer. Now, if there was a transaction for which I had no authorization, now what do you typically do as a developer? You find out what's the program that is connected to the transaction code. Very often they just do the authorizations on transaction code. I go into SE38 or SE38, I just execute the program, and I'm in. Same, if I can jump into the debugger, /h, overwrite the return code after the authorization check, and I'm in. Now, I have grown the habit myself. I don't do that anymore. And that just learns, I got to know, I got into the IT security field just a few years ago. And just by applying those basic rules, it makes security workable. Because you walk the talk and you make sure that the processes that you establish will actually also work and get respected. Now, security breaches. Now, no one wants to talk about it. Meanwhile, with GDPR active, you have to talk about it. Now, I've done a bit of searching on Google, and I found a few examples which are speaking. Some of them you probably may know. One of the biggest that ever happened is USIS. It's a commercial provider for background investigations in the US, like Homeland Security is one of their customers. Now, what actually happened is in 2015, there was an unpatched SAP attack vector being used. So a lot of data actually got extracted from those systems. Now, as a consequence, they've lost a $3 billion contract, and 2,500 people actually lost their job because the firm went for bankruptcy. So actually, sometimes a very basic vulnerability may have very, very serious consequences. Now, a few more examples I was able to find. Now, the Greek Ministry of Finance. Now, they were not doing very well a few years ago. So, Anonymous, you may know them, the guys with the special masks. Now, they actually made use of a SAP zero-day exploit. And a SAP zero-day exploit, that's an exploit, that's a vulnerability which is not yet known. You probably come to know it when you perform a code scan. So there was no patch for it yet. Now, the Greek ministry never acknowledged, nor did they deny, which is the same as acknowledging. So, but if you look today on the internet, you would still find the SAP usernames and the actually decrypted passwords. Now, a few more examples I found. Southwest One. Now, this is something that we do see very frequently, actually. Now, when you got IT auditing coming in and they review your audit logs, they may see certain security breaches. Now, with them, they are supporting the police force, and they actually find out, that even non-police force people had access to, very critical databases. Now, NVIDIA was also a very known one, was also a major data breach. What happened there is, I believe that was in 2014, there was a Chinese hacker who found a vulnerability on the SAP gateway system. Now, the vulnerability itself got resolved by SAP years back. Now, the guy was actually a white hacker, so he did actually send a message to NVIDIA saying, that's your vulnerability, you may want to patch it. He did not get any response. He got a bit annoyed. So what did he do? He actually posted his findings on 2 Chinese websites. Now, as a result, the weekend after, when a lot of people got time, they actually started testing the vulnerability. As a result, NVIDIA had to close the website for 2 weeks because of the risk. Now, there was no actual data loss. That's what NVIDIA officially claimed, but the image loss is unrepairable. Now, experts say there are 3 types of organizations, and I do hope that a number of people here in the room, I know that are active in the security field, would confirm. There are organizations that have been hacked and that talk about it. There are organizations that have been hacked and that know about it, and there are organizations that have been hacked. Every single audit we perform, we will always find signs of hacking. Does hacking always come from the outside? No, absolutely not. The majority of data breaches that we see in real life in SAP, they actually originate from the inside. Now, some examples that we actually caught in the wild while running some audits. Now, I had to comment out a few lines because I wasn't allowed to, of course, for clear reasons, to show all the details. The very first one, that's the existence of a backdoor. That's a discriminating authorization check, as SAP would call it. It does come from SAP standard coding. I won't give you the program name. So what happens here is they got hard coding on the SAP external username. If it's the SAP external username, they don't perform any authorization check on the credit card transaction. The second one that we've seen is, that was a bit of a bigger vulnerability. There was a very active developer on development writing a Z program in order to modify one of the HR tables. Now, that case, it was only a temporary program. There was a major data breach. Now, we also, and that's something that we do see more frequently, temporary assignment of critical authorizations, so be it for support purposes. Now, in this case, it was not for support purposes. Now, what happened? Someone modified the SNC name in the user master in order to single sign on using someone else's identity. He did log on, instantly changed it back in order to not become visible. Now, with proper auditing tools, also these things, you can just identify them in real time. Critical data extractions. That's probably the thing that we see the most. Now, and not all critical data extractions are done with bad intentions. Now, people do download data from your SAP system as part of their daily operations. But if you need to download the user master, then please do not download the passwords. So, and by tracking, in this specific example, we've seen a critical download of all the credit card data. Now, this was a major data breach, because just look at the size. There's 2.6 megabyte of credit card data. There's a lot of credit card numbers that you got. Now, what we've also seen, something I've already emphasized in the beginning of the session, password hashes. The tool, John the Ripper, you may Google it. It actually comes with an ABAP program in order to extract the hashes. There's even a manual that tells you on how to inject the code if you would not have access to the editor. Now, we've seen that program being installed on customer side, on development. Let me be very clear, I've never seen it on production, which is a good thing. But due to the fact that a lot of people recycle their passwords between development and production, it is still a major data breach. Now, we've also seen ABAP games in production. Now, that by itself may be relatively harmless. Now, Minesweeper is not going to blow up your system, but it does emphasize on you've got a major issue within your internal audit processes. How can it be that such a transport runs through up to production? Now, in the next example, we're going to shortly talk about Rfc hopping. Now, jumping from system to system using critical remote function calls. Now, if we perform a system audit, one of those things that we always perform is an RFC penetration test. Now, if you've got a bit of a decent landscape with a number of systems, you will have a few hundred to a few thousand RFC destinations in between your systems, which is a humongous number. And there is always the risk that over time, authorizations get polluted. You use fixed user IDs with fixed passwords. The authorizations on the receiving side actually expand, and certain users would have too many authorizations. Now, in this example, I created it's a fictive example. Now, and that's also an example that maybe Christoph could later on show at the booth. If we start with ECC development. Now, in development, you typically don't have a lot of very strict regulations. So from there onwards, I could inject a user into Solution Manager development, because there's a lot of insecure destinations existing. I could use a remote function call in order to then again log on to Solution Manager development. Now, the reason I do that with a different identity, of course, I want to make the tracking a little bit more complicated. So as soon as you jump from one system to the other, you got the option to change your identity. Now, then we also use an insecure destination to get into HR acceptance. Again, these are very often interconnected boxes because I start with Solution Manager, which is connected to everything. And on on HR acceptance, I do see that the HR acceptance box is connected to your production box of HR, which by itself is not okay. You should never connect an acceptance box or non-production box to a production box. Only exceptions would be technical monitoring. Now, in many of the audits that we perform, we will always find a way. Because we don't do this manual, we did automate this. And using an RFC table read function module, you could basically read every table, any field, all the data that you want. Now, just last week, I was at a security audit for a governmental organization. It literally took me close to an hour to get into the building. I had to go a body scan, to check my passport, my history, and then I walked actually into the office with the SAP security team. It took me 30 minutes to extract all the data on the USB stick. Of course, it was a white hack to indicate the vulnerabilities, but these guys were really shocked due to the fact that they really had a full sense of security. Now, some last examples I want to share with you. Debugger. The debugger is a very powerful tool, also a very dangerous tool. First one being, that's a development thing. It happened in development. Now, someone can bypass an authorization check. And that's again, I rephrase myself a little bit. Walk the talk. Even developers on development, if they want to test something and they don't have the authorization, make them aware they get the authorization. Make sure that they don't always bypass. The second one, that was a finance override. Someone changed the account number in the debugger for a productive posting. So that was productive. Last one is, you may know that one as well, table display, transaction SE16. You can type in, if you got access, you can just type in any table name, you press enter, you press display on a single record, you go into the debugger, you press F7, you change ucode from show to edit, and you can edit any field. So the debugger is a very powerful tool. Now, how do you generate awareness? Awareness generation program that you could execute within your firm. There are tons of organizations on the market that would actually assist you in doing that. It's nothing new. I've been Googling a bit. And even in the war, they actually already started with it. These were one of the very first billboards ever created that talk about generating security awareness. Now, first one, loose chips sink ships, and a careless word is needless sinking. So anyway, also in the SAP area, we can also do something very similar. Whenever you think about going for a program to generate the awareness, the three main topics that you need to focus on. First of all is communication. Make it clear, relevant, regular, so keep repeating. And then also importantly, make sure it's not boring, because then you'll literally lose your people. Now, at the end of this talk, I do hope that at least the awareness about security stays with you a little bit longer than the bar downstairs. Now, checklists and procedures. Now, whenever you apply or you enforce certain regulations, make sure they are pretty well documented so people know what to follow, what is the guideline. Now, if you connect a Fiori app to the internet, now what are the things to check? Make sure that all is very well documented. And then last one, controls. Now, measurement drives performance. If you don't perform regular checks, processes and usage will deteriorate. People will forget. You need to perform instant and constant monitoring. So if someone performs a breach, make sure he knows and make them accountable for it. Now, assigning a cost value is also pretty important. So as soon as someone knows what the possible cost of a data breach is, you're probably going to wake up. Now, I've actually listed here a website, and I do believe I had it open here as well, because that website also shows us one more interesting point. I do believe it's this one. No, it's an IBM website, so it's open to you as well. I don't know how they've calculated it, but realistically, in the breaches that we've seen ourselves, it takes an average 196 days before a data breach is even identified, which is a very long time. Now, I'm not sure if you got your audit logs active. If you do have, good start. Secondly, do you also keep your audit log for such a long time? Now, if you do, brilliant. The majority of us, no, they won't know. Good. Now, I'll quickly run through an example. The lady was just showing a board. I may run out of time soon, so I have to rush it a little bit. Now, we are a SAP application development company. We develop security software. So for us, it's very important that all the code that we write is secure by design. Whenever we write code, if it has a vulnerability, we would actually lose face. So there are two types of developers. We got the cowboys. And as soon as complexity grows, what also grows is the amount of defects. That's clear, bugs. But what's always on a constant high level is the amount of coding vulnerabilities, because they don't know how to mitigate certain risks. Now, the type of people that we typically like to work with are dependentic coders. Now, people that really care for their coding. Now, the only thing that's going to grow with complexity is the time until the piece of development that they have will arrive on your desk. It will take just a bit longer. Now, security always starts with coding. Now, those very same SAP Security Notes, I've also listed them by vulnerability type. Now, you may not be able to read it. It may be a bit small, but here on the absolute left side, it says program errors. About all the 4,000 security notes created till date, they all originate from coding bugs. So your code base is of utmost importance. Now, we also make it relatable. We assign a cost value. How do you do that for a developer? Now, you talk about the most expensive coding bug in history. And that's the Samsung 7 Galaxy bug. There was a bug in the firmware of the device that did not prevent the battery from overheating. So you may know that story. If you had such a loss, of course Samsung was able to survive it because they had the leverage. If that would happen to us, now we're gone. Now, what we've also done is we've made the development lifecycle and the code checking as an integral part of our normal operations. Now, when a developer codes, you may tell them, use Code Inspector, use ATC, and so on. It's all brilliant, but all these things come optional. They are not enforced. What we do is we use those same tools, but we run them when the developer actually writes code. If there would be a vulnerability while he codes, he receives an email. And that email will tell him, you got a vulnerability at that code line, make sure you fix it before you actually even think about releasing. So we've embedded that process into our daily operations. We also make users feel accountable. If we got a customer that raises a bug against our software, it's going to be that developer that will have to fix it, mainly. SAP Security Quiz. Now let's do a quick quiz. And for that we're going to use the application which is called Kahoot. So you may want to open your device. So let me run it in full screen. So it's loading now. So you go to the website. Thanks for reducing the noise a bit. Yep. So you can join the game by going to the website or installing the application on your mobile phone. So I'll give it a few more minutes until people start joining. Now it's not complicated. So we see Ruff, hoo-hoo, and more people joining us. So I'll wait just a few more seconds. Now there's nothing that you can win, but I just wanted to give you an example on how you can, get your user community a little bit more involved. The session is an hour. We do hope that you just recall a few things of this. Okay, we got 12 players to start with. I do believe you can still join later on as well. So let's make a move. Now, the 10 questions, you will have to answer quite quickly on your mobile phone. How many failed login attempts lead to locking the account? The question is still on the top. You just have to answer by selecting the right color. Oh, people are quite quick in answering. This being the first one. Very good. It's only 4 people there now. It's 5. 5 is the correct answer. Normally after 3 times you get locked out. If you do that again after 5, your account actually gets entirely locked. Good. Next one. Oh, Riza's winning. What measure increases your SAP security posture the most? Okay, very good. 8 people actually had it good. I already emphasized on it. Lock your PC when you leave it. It's a very easy thing. It doesn't cost a dime. And it instantly makes the system a lot more secure. Of course, all the other ones will do as well, but they take a little bit more time to implement. Now, Riza's doing very good. Which transaction do you call to close the SAP QE when you're eager to go home? Oh, very good. No one likes beer. Rough, leading. Which transaction is used to delete all security audit logs in SAP? Now, I knew that I was speaking in front of a tech audience, so I could ask such questions. It's SM18. Surprisingly, there's only one person that knows it. So most of the other transactions are there to display the audit log, to configure the audit log, to delete it. SM19. Now, don't try that. Don't delete your audit logs. How often does SAP release security patches? So we got 10 questions in total. Just a few more to go. Exactly, every month. Now, I can't even pronounce that, the one that's leading. Off we go, next one. How many RFC-enabled function modules does a blank SAP NetWeaver 7.5 contain? Actually, we've counted them, so we're very sure about the answer. Okay, exactly. I didn't expect this. Indeed, 5 people had the right answer. About 1 out of 5 SAP function modules is RFC enabled. So if you say, I do monitor my RFC functions, there's a lot of them to monitor. Gilles, very good. Which transaction code can you use to identify a failing authorization check? Wow, fantastic. Everyone almost. Gilles, you're doing very good. How many companies run SAP based on the SAP corporate website? How many companies can we actually hack? These did not count. I'm just relying on the SAP website to be correct. 404,000 customers. There's only one right answer. A bit surprising. For what is SAL the abbreviation? Security audit log, exactly. Majority of you had it right. Now, Gilles, you're really leading the game. The last question. What is the password of the user sub star when login no automatic user sub star was set to inactive? Now, for obvious reasons, we do allow to write, we've marked two answers as actually being the right answer. I think you can know which ones. Exactly, pass it is. We would have also accepted ABAP experts, by the way. Good? Sure. You're more than happy. We would buy you a beer. It's going to be sponsored by SAPinsider anyway. Thank you. Now, going back to the presentation. Of course, SAP knowledge is scarce. But we're not unique on the market. Now, in terms of, what is the risk of being hacked, etc. There's a lot of, the SAP community is large, and I try to represent that using the planet, the sun. Now, planet Earth represents the SAP experts. That's all you guys. You probably will have a lot of ways to think about, how can I penetrate a system? How can I extract data? Now, but what we should really be careful for is people living on the Dead Star. Those are the young guys. They're not necessarily SAP experts. The guys that got time and they use Google, etc., etc. So, and that is the audience that we actually need to monitor for. Now, we've already done that game. Unfortunately, I don't want to spend too much time on the second example. Actually, either myself or my colleague is going to run that second example on our booth. It's at 3:15, so if you're interested, just come up to our booth. That's something that we would also demonstrate. Now, of course, I'm very eager. Do you guys have any questions? Because the room, I didn't see any fingers during the session. Feel free to shoot your questions at this stage. No questions. People are being shy. Very good. Now, let me quickly do a time check. I do believe we still have some time to actually run through this as well then. Now, later at the booth, we actually will demo it on how it works according with the tooling. Now, it's an example that, that you could also implement yourself. It does not need a lot of intelligence to get applied. Now, you may know this from tools like Facebook, Google, etc. Whenever you use your account on a device that you've never used before, actually Google or any of these big apps, they would send you an email, and that email would state your device has been used with your account. Is it actually you? Now, if it is not you, you would have to report your identity as potentially stolen. Now, the same thing you can easily do in SAP. It just requires you to write a small program. Now, because SAP is anyway already recording all, basically everyone that logs onto the system. So with very, very basic algorithms and correlation across your landscape, you can just, because you do have all the email addresses of the genuine ID owners, Now, what we've implemented already for a few customers, just using SAP standard technologies. Whenever you log on for the first time, your ID is considered that's going to be your normal workstation. Now, but if I would ask my colleague now to start using my laptop, now that would also generate an alert because he's using my laptop. If I would have been to the toilet, I would have seen it and I could report it. And I could then investigate whether he has done certain things with my ID. So you would be really surprised on how easy this is to actually also implement within your organization. Now, we've done that a few times now, and as soon as we've implemented this, we instantly see the number of internal security breaches that we record, it instantly drops. Because people know something is watching us. And that constant, that keeps people constantly alert not to break the rules that have been set forward. So, a quick wrap-up. Now, this note I had to put in between, obligatory for the slides, but do take it with you. Now, a quick summary of what we've spoken about. Now, remember, the human element is very, very important whenever you plan a cyber defense strategy. Beware of security failure, ensure your security is unavoidable and keep it workable. Last one, institute very strict password policies if you would still have to use passwords at all. Evaluate an internal SAP Security Awareness program. Now, we go from company to company as well, and we do see that every time that you run an onboarding, you need to run through a certain survey. Now, very often these surveys are very boring. You need to checkbox, 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 and you actually don't even read it. So make sure if you go for such a program, try to get people on your side. Make sure that they feel committed. Utilize SAP logging capabilities. Now, I do still have 5 minutes, I believe. Whom in the room has the security audit log active? Please raise your hand. There's quite a few. If I would have asked this question about a year back, I probably would have one hand up. Now, who has it active without the use of filters? Wow. Yeah, I know you because I was there. Okay, even that's to me a bit surprising. Normally we see, if they activate security audit log, but then they start complaining, we don't know what to log, we don't know where to store the logs, what shall we do with it at all? It's going to be an impact on my performance. Now the golden rule is, make sure it's active, no rules at all, no white spots. That's the only thing that will work. If you ever have to face a security breach, the cost or the impact of all the drawbacks of the logging are going to be nullified instantly, because you do need that raw material for your investigation and analysis purposes. Now, very good. We came to the end of my session. In case you've got questions, it's now time to speak up. And else, I'm still going to be here for a day and a half upstairs at my booth. So just come and see me. I do hope I, did generate a little bit of security awareness. Now, please go and multiply and evangelize SAP security. Thank you.